What's up, everyone? It's your boy Freeze, and unfortunately, I forgot that I had tickets to the Norfolk State versus Delaware State game today. So I'm actually in place of my live stream. I'm just going to do a premiere event. I do plan to be back for the live stream next week. But anyway, I'm excited about the topics today, just because got a lot of stuff to talk about, man. So let's see what I got in my notes. And the first thing that I want to talk about is I want to talk about events because a new event schedule came out earlier. Now, I actually got this ahead of the newsletter. Shout out to Callum for just giving me a heads up on what was to come with the event schedule. There's some good things, there's some bad things, and then we'll talk about that in addition to this week's event as well and my thoughts on that. I also wanted to talk about a little bit of the future of one particular core, and I can go ahead and tell you guys, I've talked about it before, but the Alpha Trion Core, the building core. I was talking to some friends earlier this week, and they had some really, really good ideas, and I had some good ideas as well. So I want to talk about that and where we could possibly go with that core, particularly because when they go do prime cores like that for the buildings, typically it aligns with your HQ updates. And, we're due for one of those soon for HQ 19. So we'll talk about it. And I just want to get you guys' thoughts on that as the community. And the last thing, and the thing that everybody's been a little bit anxious about, is going to be I have some info on the December content patch. It is not finalized. I do want to lead off with that, but just so you get an idea of where the team is looking, we haven't started testing anything yet. Right now, we're just in the conversation phase, but I do want to talk about that a little bit today as well. Some things that you can expect, which bots you can expect to receive a nerf. Overall, it's not as bad as I thought that it was going to be, but we'll talk our way through it and kind of get a gauge on what to expect. But all in all, should be pretty good video. Like I said, I'm opening it up as a premiere video so that everybody can still enjoy the chat and everything like that and leave comments. I do plan to spend some time tomorrow going back and looking at all of the comments if I'm not there live answering questions. So, but anyway, before we get into any of that, I don't have the newsletter yet, but let's talk about this week's event. All right, so this week's event is an Alliance Totalizer. I know a lot of people have been asking for one of those after so many, of the individual events. So, well, here you go. So you wanted the Alliance Totalizer, and what we got is a 1,250,000 point Alliance Totalizer, normal, no mayhem. And so the prizes you can get up to 6K of your Requiem Blaster shards, 68K of Cybertronian Alloy, up to 100K of Megatronus Prime Spark, 500K regular Spark, and up to 150 total shard crystals. They also are going to have 50 of the Trick or Transform crystals, which are going to have a chance to drop different items. I'm not going to read that part off because they actually break it down here in a little bit. For your total shard crystals, you get 25% odds at getting one of the following: 25 of your 5-star shards, 100 of your 4-star shards, 300 3-star shards, 1.5K premium shards. For your Trick or Transform crystals, it breaks down a little bit differently. So they have 16% odds of getting 10 premium character crystals, 20 premium combat chips, 25K of your combat spark, 500 Shanix coins, 5,000 Z Energon, or 1 improvised G1 crystal. You get 1% odds at getting 1,000 5-star shards or a Shadow Skin Core, and then you get 0.4% odds of getting either BBE, Binary Bond Element, Combiner Upgrade Skip, Troop Upgrade Skips, troop upgrade level skip or building upgrade skip. So for me, looking at this, I think they're putting a tiny bit too much weight, and I get it. It's chance crystal, but like that's a lot of emphasis on combining upgrade skips and troop upgrade. All those skips you can get in like Cyber Pass. So I think the 0.4% is probably a little bit too much. It's already really diluted because there's a chance to get so many different crystals in there. I just accepted I'm not going to get a binary bond. It's just not happening. It hasn't happened to me ever since they started doing any of the chance crystals. So unless there are opportunities where there is definitively a binary bond that you can earn, this is nice to have content for me as I look at the overall event. I'll be honest with you. When you start doing million point events, and this one, 1,000,025, when you do that in normal mode, it does bother me a little bit, just because. And I was having a conversation with some of the people that I talked to on my Discord server. If you guys haven't joined, it's in the link is in the description of every video. But I was having this conversation, and I was saying, man, look, this reminds me of an event that we had in like 2020 or something like that. When and at that time, I was organizing events for an alliance, and we were doing normal mode, and it just got to be like we were constantly moving around for events. Now, where I am now with the Horde, I said we're not going to move for an event like this, to do like 31.5K. I think it'll be per person. It's doable. But my major complaint with events lately has been that, we get the new hotness with primes and everything. We're just collecting, just currency. When I start to think about larger events, especially a larger normal event, usually gets something, you get a piece of content. So overall, a little bit disappointed in this. I'll grind it out. I'm not really doing anything this weekend. I actually finally got offered for a new job, so I start that next week, and so I'll probably just be sitting put, and I'll play it, kind of like I said, like I used to play it in like 2020. I probably do about 5 battles per hour, and then just keep coming back every hour. But overall, I mean, it's got good amounts of Megatronus Prime Spark, which I could use, and Cybertronian Alloy, which I could also use. Other than that, like to me, this is just hamster wheel stuff, But along with that, so I did get access to a new schedule that's going to be for, honestly, the new schedule is going to go all the way through the holidays, and I think that it ends like the first week of February. So let me go ahead and gather that, and we can discuss that as well, because and I want to get people's opinions on it. I have my thoughts, but I want to get people's opinion on that. So let's pull that up real quick. So I'm looking at the event schedule that, honestly, it should come up in the newsletter today. And, some good things and some bad things. I am ecstatic at the fact that they planned ahead through Thanksgiving. They planned through Christmas, New Year's, all that stuff, because the thing that I absolutely can't stand around the holiday time is just pushing larger events like the exact week that you're in there, trying to get through the holidays. So I'm happy about that. I do got a lot of questions about some of this stuff, and so I'm going to go ahead and go through it. Starting with this week's event, it's a medium event, like we already talked about that one. 1.25 mil. So that contribution. I said earlier, 31.5K. It's 31.25K, but per alliance member, if you're full of 40. So because I know some people get nitpicky about that stuff, but so we're moving on to next week, where they're going to do an individual combat event. That one's going to be easier. It's going to be 10 to 20K. Now, my understanding, and this is just hearsay, is that they actually wanted to move the following week's event, the week of November 14th through 17th. They wanted to move that to next week. But the problem is with that, there's not a lot of notice for an alliance event that people are going to have to move for. So I want to say the leadership council probably had some pushback on that. So that's going to be, your 4 million point event, your endurance event. Now, in that particular endurance event, there's going to be some of the bots, the legacy bots coming in. It's going to be doing something different. There's actually going to be 2 legacy bots in this one. And for that, honestly, it's cool that they're doing the 2 legacy bots. This is the problem that I have with this particular event. When it was web store only, one of the questions that we always have is, well, how long is it going to be an exclusive? Because, to be honest with you, I haven't even really leveled my cutthroat yet. And I said I got him because it was $50. But now to have to go back, and so now essentially this is going to be an endurance event where the main prize isn't going to be a prize for me. And I should have thought about it because I was just bidding on this event. I'll probably change my bid. I'll probably do 1.5 mil for this one, only because I don't have Cyclonus, because, Cyclonus and Power Glide are going to be at 1.5 mil, which is pretty cool. So there's a cool part to that. The major rank, honestly, I'm just not overly concerned about at this point. I got majors. I don't have generals, and I still kind of want to see us get to the point, even if that means they increase the event total a little bit, where you can earn your way to general rank. So for me, it's, this event, it's got us good and it's got us bad. The problem that I'm really having, though, is the following week. So the following week, and that's the week before Thanksgiving, they're going to have individual endurance, and that's going to have your rating and your 5-star rating, your 5-star Dino King parts. So that one is going to be 120K to complete, and that'll get you all 6 of your 5-star parts for that. We hadn't started testing anything yet. I know when we originally got Dino King, we started testing a 5-star version. This one I ultimately don't have a problem with, but there is going to be a new 3x mode that if you read the newsletter, I believe they're going to explain more of that in the newsletter. So more to follow on that from my channel, but the information should be out there for that at this point. So I don't really have a problem with that. I do get what they were trying to do there. They wanted to move this alliance totalizer up. They wanted to move that up. And realistically, what they probably should have considered doing it, well, and again, I say 5-star rating and Dino King aren't done yet. Since that's individual, it would make more sense to move that to next week's event if they were able to do so, in my opinion, but it might not be done and tested at that point. So I understand why we're going to have 2, larger events back to back. For me personally, I'm probably going to scale back on the event for the 14th through 17th, because I don't need cutthroat. I don't need to be doing large events back to back. It's going to be mayhem, so it'll make it easier for me to just do the 1.5 mil. But for those who need both or want both, that opportunity is going to be available to you. So moving down to Thanksgiving weekend, so the 28th through the 1st, it's going to be a Thanksgiving themed event, 10 to 20K. So ultimately, not too terrible to try to keep it easy and individual for Thanksgiving. And then the following week, it's another individual endurance. It's going to be Mayhem or this new 3x mode, depending on how it goes out. But overall, it's going to be the Arc Nemesis Titan, 125K. Try to keep it in line with the other Titans. And that'll probably be one that I'm going to complete. We'll see how it goes. I said, but yeah, that'll probably be one I complete. But I know there's been a lot of concerns. There's been concerns about, as far as the Titans go, like are they going to be too similar at this point? But Arc and Nemesis do have some really good passive abilities. So just for that aspect, I'll probably go for that one. That'll be followed up by another easy combat event, 10 to 20K. And then the weekend of December 19th through the 22nd, there's going to be an Alliance Endurance for your, so it's saying get Prime artifact resources, and then a leaderboard will give you some extra artifacts and resources. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, even with that being Mayhem and 3x mode, looking at it holistically, that might be one that I might take it a little bit easier on, depending on how it comes out. Just because, like, I'm damn sure not doing a leaderboard just to go get resources, and doing 100K 4 mil Alliance event and the additional stresses that come with just for resources. I'm probably not doing that one to the fullest of my ability. Just going to be honest with you. Just from a financial standpoint as well. Then the following weekend is going to be Christmas, so they're going to do a Christmas themed event, 10 to 20K. Then they're going to do a New Year's one that's going to be 400 to 800K. So try to keep it easy. But after you do a lot of individual events, people want their Alliance events. That's been a huge talking point lately. So they made sure they stuck in an Alliance event that weekend. So cool. And then as we go into, for New Year's, they're doing the 400 to 800K. And then the following week of January, they're going to do individual endurance, BBE. So I will be doing that one because there are bots that I got, or combats that I want to take to 11 that I haven't been able to for a while because I hadn't been doing all the BBE events. But 75K, new 5-star combat, 50K, new 4-star combat. It is going to be Mayhem or this new 3x mode. So, now we're talking about having incentives for stuff like, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. And then we also are going to have a couple of easy events for January 16th through 19th. They're looking at doing Alliance, and then they're looking at doing another easy individual one after that. And then the final one that they have up there is going to be a traditional Alliance Endurance event. It's going to be a new bot. So for that one, definitely looking forward to it. I don't know who the bot is yet, but I'll be participating in that because I just don't like the long waits that come sometimes with waiting for a bot to hit the patch. And I've expressed before on the channel, I don't even really get overly excited about batches anymore. I wish batches would honestly just go away, if I'm going to be honest with you, but that most likely won't happen. So you kind of just live with it. But yeah, so let me know in the chat and in the comments if you're watching this after the fact. What do you think about this new event schedule? It's definitely grindy. I'm not going to sit up there and lie about that. It's a few events, and I think at this point, knowing all of this ahead of time, I do really like the transparency. I do like the planning that they're doing for the holiday season. It's just it's essentially 6 pay-to-play events. If you're going to complete. So I'm going to be really judicious about how I go about doing this particular event. So this particular set of events. But let me know what you think. And, especially if you leave a comment, I'll be talking about it. more soon. All right, so moving on, I want to start talking about a particular prime core, the Alpha Trion Core, and some of the plans that and this is just kind of roundtable talk stuff that I had with some of my friends. But I want to see what kind of ideas you guys have as well. So let me go pull up that and we can discuss. Now, I've had this conversation in the past, but I want to have it again about the Alpha Trion Core and some things that I think that we could do in order to improve it. And I really want to gather your thoughts as well. And before I get into that, I want to go over a little bit of the history of what happened last time we were trying to do Alpha Trion building core. So if you looking at, I'm looking at it on a test server, but in the missing in action section, originally when we tried to do this, it's been almost 2 years, probably about 2 years ago now. What they were going to try to do was increase the defense's attack and effect range by a percentage. So this would have been 6% before you even did any kind of upgrades. And so for me, that made me curious, because one of the things that I always look at is how, and particularly right now I'm going to talk about top players. Top players are always wanting to, usually around this time of year, increase difficulty. What the pattern that I've seen is there is typically time periods where the game gets easier before it gets harder. And so from a standpoint of looking at it as a relatively patient person, I do know definitively that HQ19 is around the corner. I do know definitively that there's a new defense that's around the corner. And so I think that a lot of your correcting things, especially since the previous content patch that made things, it did make things a little bit easier with some of the buffs. I think that there's a level of patience and just waiting on the game to get more difficult. A few weeks back I was talking about individual wars, and that was how I hope that those individual wars will help top players scratch that itch of difficulty, because what I don't want to see happen is the game become too difficult for people that are still up and coming, people who haven't quite reached that top level. But one thing that I look at is, what changes do we make permanently and what changes do we make temporarily? And that's why I'm really huge on war effects, because maybe there's something that you have in your arsenal, in your roster, that already works when the war effects change. The bases don't really change that as often as I would like. And it's because, there's a lack of creativity on the community, myself included. I will go change different outpost spots and different prime cores. But, most of us copy a lot of the same base designs. With that said, one of the permanent changes that you could make would have been this Alpha Trion Core and making it increase in range, because, and when you think about it, say we had a core like that and we go and do something like, MDS, say you go use that and the range is really, really wide and it's doing crazy amounts of damage. That would inherently change the difficulty. And if you go switch variants and say you go use something like, say, the minigun variant, now you've got it's already got good range, but now you've got longer range of just hitting it with additional DPS because of the glass gas effect. That would honestly be pretty huge to me. So to me, it was a foul on us to not even test it. People were just like, but people got so stuck on what the bot core does. So let's take a look at that real quick. So here you have your Alpha Trion Core, that your bot core, and your bot core says you gain an ability point every 8.5 seconds. So a lot of people, when they look at my builds and see that I don't always use that Alpha Trion Core. You know, they look at it like it's a cardinal sin. And my response to them, which I find to be pretty pragmatic, is I'm using a bunch of AoE. So if I'm affecting a bunch of defenses in the area and I'm destroying a bunch of defenses in the area and I'm recouping my points quickly and I'm destroying buildings quickly and I'm using, you know, as you can see, Rodimus Unicronus in a lot of my videos, and I'm getting damage boosts and getting all this stuff down quickly, do I actually need this core? And the answer for me, for most of my builds, is no, I don't. But they are different scenarios where people 100% need the core. But I wouldn't go as far as to say it's must have or a cardinal sin. Anyway, and how this relates to the defensive core, a lot of people were saying, well, if the core gives you ability points, the building core should take ability points away or stop you from earning ability points, which that's cool, but is that the most effective use? Is that a more of an effective use than having what they were presenting with the long range? The answer for me is no, it's not more effective, because, all right, so now you just got to prioritize, take out that core. And the other thing is, if it was taking away ability points, then essentially you would have Alpha Trion on offense, where you're saying that that's a cardinal sin not to use. And then you would have Alpha Trion on defense, essentially canceling each other out. So to me, it makes zero sense. And regardless, the developers are saying they can't, they're not able to do that anyway. So to me, it's a moot point to even discuss anytime we talk about the Alpha Trion Core. Like I said, just if we can just start from a clear playing field of this is what's realistic and these are the things that we're able to do, then at that point, then maybe we can have like a good discussion on what we should do with this thing. But this, to me, right here, what we're looking at on the screen, originally was a good idea. Is, you know, when we say we want more increased defense, this is something that would have got it for you. So there's some ideas that we did come up, and I'm gonna pull up my notes real quick because there were some really, really good ideas that I came up with and a couple of my buddies came up with. And I'm going to be pushing for some of these ideas. So let me know what you think. So the first one that we came up with, a buddy of mine says that we made the core configurable for rotating monthly effects. And I'm not against that. It's a good idea, but I was like, I wouldn't want to do that to that particular core, only because that's something you can just do in the game. Like I've always said that monthly you should have to change effects, or, you know, even if it was just, I would settle for quarterly, but what we wind up running into is changing effects. Not often enough. Sometimes it's been a year, sometimes it's 2 years. This is where the game allows itself to become stale, because, you know, these things don't change. And this is not really a stab at the team, but there's not a whole lot of things with everything else that they have going on as far as bringing out new content and stuff. Do I actually believe that they're going to change the effect on this thing every single month? The answer to that's no. I mean, just point blank. And it's not me trying to be, you know, sharky with the team or anything like that. They got too much other stuff going on, but I do like the concept, right? But I think that's something that you could just do in game anyway, right? So another idea that they came up with, you know, buddies of mine was saying, have different effects for different leagues. And great in concept, because one thing that I talk about when I talk about permanent of the game is most of the game is balanced towards Prime League. This is one of the reasons why I want, you know, the individual war concept to become an actual thing, because now you have, because essentially if you look at the top teams in the game, you know, there's a big difference, and you can see that when we have Unicron tournaments, but there's a big difference between like the top 3 to the top 5 to the top 10. So even if you made everything specifically for the top 10, you know, that's 400 players in the game. What about everybody else, right? So having different effects for different leagues would be cool, but it kind of goes back to my original statement of that's something that you could just do anyway. You can just do that in game without having to actually make a core for it. So another idea that came up was with the primes. So I'm gonna go switch over to the primes real quick. That may be, and it's a good idea, but once again, it's one of those things. I think it is something that we should just do in the game. So they were talking about making the prime lab, like if you had the Alpha Trion Core, you could turn your prime lab into a defensive thing. You know, you can make it an outpost, a prime outpost. I like that idea, but I don't think you need the core for that. I think you should just make a defensive outpost, and hopefully that's something that we see in the future. But that's something you should just do. You should just make the prime lab have an outpost. So all of these are good ideas, but now that I'm saying it out loud, these are things that changes we could just make to the game to make it improve on a permanent basis defensively. So some of the better ideas that we discussed, we were discussing. Well, this one's actually my idea. I say you should prevent ability usage within a certain radius. So you could have an area where you just set this up, and then you just could limit ability usage. Now, because they can't do ability points, let me see. Say they had a large range like this one. And what I was thinking was, what if a large range like that did the same thing that a motion sensing mine did? Like if you got a bot into that area, they could not use their abilities. I think that would be pretty cool. That's actually, you know, even though it's my idea, it was my favorite idea out of everything we talked about, because, you know, some of the things that we've been talking about for years, there've been a lot of people that say SAC makes the game too easy. And, you know, we start doing all this dumb stuff like adding extra mines. Like I was in there looking at a conversation in a group chat the other day, and somebody said we should get 2 more MDS and we should get like more mines. And I think here's the thing: the people who complain the most about the lack of difficulty are always the ones that try to stay within the framework of the stuff that it's already making the game too easy. For example, you know, we start talking about having anti-fire zone cores and stuff like that, and you know, what blows my mind is folks will talk about, hey, you know, we should make the build bot invincible. No, the fuck we shouldn't. We should go in there and, you know, I think what it does is cool. I mean, when they dropped it down to 95%, I didn't really find that necessary. You know, you can make the build bot itself invulnerable to that particular type of ability. So in this case, fire. But you know, we shouldn't have never made the game Transformers Build Bot Wars. And the same thing goes with this other stuff. When it comes down to, you know, motion sensing mines, we shouldn't depend solely on motion sensing mine for this stuff. We have the ability to go in there and say, hey, if we look within the area, we look in, even if it was the area of like something like a beam laser or a missile launcher, and say, hey, if you step within this area, you are not going to be able to use your abilities. And then I see all kinds of things come into play. Like, you know, at one point, people were using like Hot Rod and Nemesis Prime. You know, I got the 4-star here, but, you know, and they were using that on defense to keep that building covered. Imagine that you got to sit up here, you know, the 5-star goes up to 16 seconds, I believe it is. And like, so if you use something like that in conjunction with, you know, this power core that's not allowing you to transform, bro, 16 seconds of the battle or not being able to transform, you know, could be potentially huge. So I'd like to see something like that become the use, and I think it fits lore wise. I think it would be awesome. Another Another idea that we came up with was prevent ability generation from protected buildings. Wait a minute, I think I just, yeah, I think I already covered that one. But here's another good one. And a friend of mine came up with this, and it would be really cool. He said that after you destroy the Alpha Trion Core, Alpha Trion protocols would start. And so he was saying, hey, maybe if you added additional damage, range, and rate of fire to all defenses, so now you would have a building that you don't want to destroy because it's going to make it harder for you. Bro, that idea, you know, I said my idea was my favorite one, and I do really like that idea. But the one my friend came up with in that particular case, dude, that was brilliant. I mean, I straight up told him that was brilliant, because what you could do, and one of the things that I actually want to see done is I want to see some of these other buildings get some attention. Like, you know, we should be able to stick cores on some of these buildings, like the Helio Harvester, the Power Core Lab, some of the more expensive buildings that you use while you're when you destroy them, to give up back major ability points. Make it so that you don't want to destroy those buildings. That would be awesome. Or you could have it to where, and my buddy brought this up as well. He said, well, maybe if you had something where you didn't get ability points for items destroyed in a certain range, because one of the reasons that my tactics work really well, and I actually go show that in some gameplay, one of the reasons my tactics work really well is because I'm taking out a lot of stuff at range. So like, say if you had a core, and this I don't know if they have the ability to do, because I think they can't really do anything with ability points, period. But they could make it so that anything within, if they could make it so that anything within a certain range was not giving you ability points, that would be awesome. I just don't think they can, because when I look at like Sunstreaker and Swindle, say back here I had something shielded, it was an Alpha Trion Core that says, hey, if you destroy this, you're not going to get anything back. That will be cool. And even though I'm not dead set on the ability point thing, and I don't even think that it's possible, it is something that you could use to kind of prevent you, because like, look at the amount of points I got back. Like right now, I've got all 40 ability points multiple times over because I didn't spam my abilities fast enough. And so for me, this is the reason why I don't use the Alpha Trion bot core, because the rate of me getting my ability points back, it's just, I'm going to get my points recouped well before I need that 8.5 seconds to go get one ability point. It's just, it's wasting space for me with this kind of team build. So for me, I'm looking at all those things, but looking, you know, definitely a lot of different ideas for the core. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you have better ideas to use for the core. But I would definitely like to see the range thing added. Like, you know, when he was talking about the Alpha Trion protocols and stuff, and it's like, hey, if you destroy this, everything's going to get harder and do more damage. I think that's a good return on investment. So let me know what you think, and let me know if you have any good ideas. All right, so I'm going to move on to the part that I know everybody's been waiting for. We want to talk about a little bit about the upcoming content patch for the winter. Supposedly, they're looking at trying to bring that out around Christmas time. I have to verify that that's still the case. But yeah, let's go take a look. I actually prepared a little bit of a PowerPoint for explaining who's being affected for the most part. So let's talk about it. All right, so with the content patch being on the way, the winter patch, one of the things I want to talk about is what to kind of expect. Now, as you can see on the screen, this is not finalized by any means, but this is just kind of where the conversation is going right now, so you can kind of prepare yourself a little bit. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is the buffs. And too many to name. There are a bunch of cost reductions. Like one whole page is really just cost reductions for a lot of bots, a lot of popular bots, as well. So as we get to the point where this is more finalized, I'll start to talk about those. But the couple of things that I'm going to talk about that kind of stood out are going to be the ones that are not just cost reductions. So with that, Cyclonus and Powerglide, they are getting a look, which is why I got him on the screen here. And to be honest with you, because they just did a legacy rework of him, I do like what they did with Cyclonus. I think it just fell a little bit short. So as a matter of fact, let's actually go and take a look at that ability. If I got him up here, because I do know, yeah, I got him in here maxed out. So let's take a look at him and what he actually does. I'll add him to one of these teams. But one of the things that I was looking at for him, he just kind of fell a little bit short. So when you look at his ability, this is the maxed out version that I got on the test server. I got him at private right now. And, I do like the concept of the ability evolving. It's pretty cool. But the normal damage, actually, I think it in game, it might actually be lower than that. I have to go double check. So don't hold me to that. But, it left a little bit to be desired. So the big argument that we kept having is like, hey, this thing can't even take out a build bot in its original state, the way we had it. But so they addressed that and put it to enough where it could destroy a build bot. But then as you start to use more ability points, you start looking at it doing AoE and then starting to do disable, which I'm kind of like, I always kind of been like, well, you're disabling stuff, but you're disabling it because you know that it's not going to destroy it. And then you get the damage boost to the end. So what's being proposed right now is, and we still have to test it and see if it's going to be balanced, but they're talking about like a 20% damage increase. And I think that'll make him much better, because the concept of what they're doing is good. And they're making them, essentially making them spammable. But we just got to test it to make sure that they don't overdo it. And that's the key thing. It's not overdoing it. So I'm going to go try him out against my good friend, certainly. And just take a look at it again. Like this is the current version. And I just want to take a look at it, see how it performs. So this will actually give us some good insight. So that's the first ability. So we're gonna come back in. So that's that's a little over 6K. Spam it again. And so that second one, then I actually got caught up there by one of the mines there. Yeah, I should have planned for that a little bit better. But I just go back in and like not get hit by the mine. But you kind of see what I'm saying. The damage is just it's not sufficient. And so I think if they give it this boost here, I think that this might be a air class spot. I think it could be potentially a top air class spot. I want to see what it is when we test it, and I want to make sure that it is not overpowered. But I do like what they're trying to do here. We'll just do that. Let old bludgeon there take over. And now what I want to do is I just want to kind of look at this MDS and see how all of this turns out. You know, it is getting some regen there. So, you know, using 3 ability wants just to go up there. And I picked this example because, you know, it's already got that Vector Prime Core on it. But even after using 4 of them, you know, even with some regen going on, you know, it's just not doing enough. So that's what we're looking at. I would love to see what happens if it gets this massive increase. You know, 20% is pretty substantial if it winds up staying that. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Another bot that's getting a potential buff, they're looking at a buff for Acid Storm and Slingshot. Basically, with Acid Storm and Slingshot, what they want to do, and let me pull him up on the screen. What they want to do there is to try to possibly do some work with his ability. I think it's at ability 11 where he starts to, the fire starts to spread. So they want to add additional damage to that, which is cool because he's another low cost bot that, you know, maybe you can get a little bit more area damage in. So looking forward to seeing that and testing that. And then we also want to look at Scrapnel and Bumblebee. So they are actually going to get, we're looking at a damage boost for them for their ability. And, you know, I know a lot of people that used to like Bumblebee and Scrapnel, particularly when Waza was using them really heavily. So I'm curious to see what this looks like if this ability gets a damage. It's supposed to be a significant damage boost. I'd like to see it and just see how it does, because right now it's like, hey, it's cheap, you know, but at the same time, you know, 324 electric damage, you know, over the course of those 9 seconds, you know, that's still a pretty low damage output. And I think a lot of that was a balancing mechanism. Well, right now I only got them at level 61, so obviously it'll go a little bit higher. But the concern there becomes, you know, does it wind up being enough damage? And then the concern also with that is because it disables, do you want it to do substantial amounts of damage? So for me, this is one I'm really curious to test out. You know, if we do it the way that we're doing it. But right now I have no complaints about it. I just got to see it in actual play test. And then we got Full Tilt and Brawn that is supposed to be getting a rework, or not a rework, but a buff as well. I need to go to my notes for a second, so let me go back to this screen and pull those up, because I forgot what he was actually going to do. So for Full Tilt and Brawn, and that was going to be a simple change. So they want those grenades, basically to focus on defenses. So that one will be pretty simple. There's still been a lot of feedback about that one, just from testers and trying to optimize, try to optimize, no pun intended, these bots. So as far as the bus, everything else is just going to be cost reductions. We'll talk about it more as we get closer, just because there's a lot of them, and I'm not going to sit up there just reading this stuff to you. I'll probably do like I did last time and actually share the list once we get to that point, and then you guys can read it and we can talk about it all at the same time. So, but let me know what you think about those particular sets of character buffs, and obviously you'll know more as we get to talk about all of those cost decreases. So All right, with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the nerfs because I know that's always a concern. And, you know, when I look at it and, people, have a tendency to just be like, well, they just nerf everything. But most of these are actually going to be cost reductions as well. So they are. And the stuff that I have on this list is all that's on the list right now. It's not, a longer list behind all of that. Like this is actually the list. So the only one that we're looking at that might not be a cost change is the ability for Hook and Ratchet. Just because when you go, and I'm actually going to pull him up and play test real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. But when you use the ability of Hook and Ratchet, what you wind up running into is that it's that ability, it just does like a lot, and they were gonna increase the cost on it. And my thing was like the base healing, but I guess they want base healing to stay high because the base healing was, I felt like, was higher than it probably needed to be. But I also haven't been using them on my war team. I went back to Minerva just because of my playstyle. It worked better than it did with Hook, even with Hook doing more healing. But when you look at the total that they have there, because the launch grenade restores 1,362 health, that gives you a total of almost 11K. You're at 10,898 for him, and I got him, on here as a captain. So I think they're going to bring that down some. The number that we're kind of looking at right now is around the 8,000 total, 8,000 total healing. But like I said, none of this is set in stone yet. And really that's the only change. That's not a, that's the only change that they're making. That's not a change to ability points. That's the only one. So I'm not gonna overshare in this on this particular video, but just to hopefully put some people at ease, because you got guys up there that don't want to use any ranks. You got guys out there that are just like, or players I should say, that are out there saying, hey man, I'm terrified to go do anything. I'm terrified to go chase bots or anything because nerfs are coming. I say, and I've been telling people for a while, if you can get through December without your favorite bots getting nerfed too bad or not at all, you're probably in the clear. But this patch is significantly smaller than the last patch because most of the work was done in that first patch. All right, so the next one we're going to look at. So everybody knew that this was probably going to make the list, but Scavenger and Rust Dust are being evaluated for a cost change. Right now, not sure exactly how that's going to go, just because what they proposed originally actually would have made them still somewhat kind of spammable, but expected to go up, but nothing crazy. Right now you're looking at maybe like a point off the initial use and see how that goes. We'll get the playtest, all that stuff, and it might change, but overall I'm fine with that. And the reason why I'm fine with that is for those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that I use a concept. I call that concept leapfrogging abilities. And so what I'll do, and what I mean by that is, and I'll actually demonstrate. When you watch a lot of my battles, you'll notice that I'll have multiple bots in a lot of cases that do similar things. In this case, Scavenger and Swindle basically are my area of effect, my AoE fire bots. And even though their abilities are somewhat different, what I'm looking at them doing right now, I don't even have his power core on them because I was doing some testing and some other stuff. But, really, really wide range, get my 8K. And, when I'm using Rodimus Unicronus, it's going to be, closer to like 12K. So I use that to clear a lot of areas. Now with Scavenger, who was Rust Dust, and Swindle, who's Sunstreaker, the ranges are much different. Swindle and Sunstreaker have that really, really long range attack. And, and a little bit more damage. So now when I'm looking at stuff that's, I'm looking at shielded stuff, and I'm looking at, stuff that's all the way in the back, trying to do a little bit of preparation for, a little pathing. And so when I look at that, that's one of the things that I like to do is kind of layer out those abilities. So I like to use Swindle at short range, and then, or Swindle at long range, Scavenger at long ranges, or Scavenger at short ranges, Swindle at long ranges. And the reason why I point that out is because it does help you save a ton of ability points by doing it that way. You can go in there and just use them for the short stuff. So even if they're able to drive up the cost here, I'm going to recoup a lot of my ability points back and essentially not even worry about it. And so this is like something that's great for path, and this is why I like to use multiple abilities to kind of do similar type abilities, because as you can see right here, I'm not worried about ability points right now. I'm getting it all back in an area of effect, and I can continue to use those. So even if this cost goes up, I'm not like really in a bad spot. So that's kind of what I'm looking at it like. And I say that because the next bot on the list is, oops, I got the wrong screen there. But the next bot on the list is Swindle and Sunstreaker. So we're looking at a minor, relatively minor change in that particular case. Like I said, probably going to be a small change in cost, but the goal is to keep the ability the same. So I'm going to say, as of right now, without me having tested the content, that I'm probably going to be okay with keeping this on my war team. Both of these guys, really all of the bots that we talked about so far, I'd be comfortable as it stands currently, in theory, keeping them on my team. Even though I'm not using Hook Ratchet, but that's from a strategic purpose. It's not because Hook and Ratchet are bad. And then also on the list, Antagony and Tasmania Kid are on the list. Cost change, minor cost change, and they'll probably try to look at it and see how that goes, just for the same reason, area of effect. And shoot, I actually don't have them on my. Oh yeah, I do. But when you just look at those abilities, and here's the saving grace here with their abilities. You can only take them up so high in cost because it's got 2 abilities. So another one of those ones where it might go up a point, on initial use. Not sure yet, but that's kind of the direction they're going in. They're not trying to nerf them into the ground and make you not use them. They're just trying to balance them. And so I was actually kind of shocked when I saw, some of the stuff they were talking about for this stuff. And, this is not like last batch. Last batch was, I felt like, was the major batch, just because, and I'm actually going to pull Antagonist stuff up onto the screen right now, because they got those 2 abilities. And and let's be honest, it's a decent amount of damage getting done by that alpha swipe there. Yeah, this point change, this set of point changes, this is not gonna pull for most people. Now, if you're the kind of, it's not gonna pull them off your war team. Now, if you're one of the people who's like, hey man, well, they they got nerfed and stuff should never get nerfed, and I'm pulling them just because there was a nerf and not even looking to see if it's still any good. If you're one of those people, then yeah, you're gonna remove it. But for most of us, these cost changes aren't gonna remove them. It's just going to balance the game a little bit. So now this one, I will say, I'm not even sure about that, but Kup and Dead End, because of how they're used for the purpose of sack strategy, they're on the chopping block. Oh wow, I didn't. What happened here? Because I said I got a much higher level on my regular server, but anyway, because he can teleport around and stuff like that, we were looking at a couple of different ways, and I'm actually gonna pull him up on the screen. Because he can teleport, we were looking at different ways on how he possibly should change, but ultimately they're talking about doing a cost increase. But my concern there is because of the way that bases are designed in Transformers Earth Wars in most cases, it's not uncommon for you to see, just like split type bases. And so you can go use more ability points on sack trying to get to the back outpost. And even with this one not really being much of a split, like you wanted to try to get back here to these outposts and everything. If you wanted to go and do that, most bases have quite a bit of stuff in the front for you to go in there and recoup some of your points. So from that aspect, I don't think that the cost change is going to stop sack. I did say that, hey, it's, I think what I said was it's a good change. Just because I think people have been becoming a little bit too dependent on that particular strategy. I know some players that get very upset with you when you don't go do the Kup and Dead End sack. But I don't think it's going to make him come off of people's war teams by him having a cost change. I think that it's just going to hurt you a little bit down the road in terms of ability points. But at the end of the day, you're going to recoup those ability points. So I'm interested to see how it turns out. And I'm interested to see if they finally decide to do something else to make him not quite as, sack friendly. And then I don't know if this one's going to stick around or not, but there was some discussion about minion combats for the same reason for sack. A lot of people are doing the airdrop strategy where you just take a minion, put them on an air class spot that has long range, and just pop all these outposts. There's some discussion around that as well. So we'll see how it turns out. But like I said, when I was looking at the document, they did line that one out. So we'll see how that turns out. But let me know in the comments and let me know in the chat if you're watching this live, what you think. But anyway, let me look at, I want to look at a couple of items that were also being discussed. That I wouldn't necessarily categorize as buffs or nerfs, but so they are looking at changing war effects and doubling war rewards for about 2 weeks. I am not sure because there was some pushback on what they were talking about for war effects. But my understanding is whatever war effects they have, they're going to be it's going to be pretty basic changes. We're not going to go for the massive changes. And honestly, with HQ 19 right around the corner, I honestly don't like when we change war effects and HQ phase at the same time. I think that war effects is something that should be bridging the gap of the difficulty in between phases and stuff. So like for me, if you were going to make a phase, say if you were going to make a phase and it was 6 months from now, 3-month mark would be a good time to say, hey man, like right in the middle point, let's go change some war effects so the difficulty doesn't get. Because like, let's be honest, man, it's been easy since the last content patch a couple of months ago, and people are already complaining about being bored and how every biners, every war is a no biner war and stuff like that. So when you make people change, even if you have to, there's gonna be some top players that already have like every bot and they're maxed out, and they're just like, well, I'm still bored. Bro, it's a phrase I've been saying. Nobody did this to you. You did this to you. But when the game itself hasn't done its part to make you change strategies, then that part is actually on the game, and so it's holding everybody equally accountable. There are some talks of reworks to Snarl and Hunger. I want to talk about that more when we actually start working on it, because when we start testing it, so I'm not going to get into any details really about that, but they are looking to try to do a Snarl and Hunger rework, and they also want to look at a Punch and Counter Punch 5-star legacy and do some fixes there. They are looking at doing a web store exclusive for Beast Wars, Ironhide, and Sea Clamp. So we'll see more of that. Like I said, those will be things I talk about as we test. And they also looking at a couple of bug fixes. Like they want to double check some stuff with Hotspot and Tantrum, and they also want to look at Impactor. They're saying the absorption percentages are wrong. So if they look into that and fix that, they're not calling it a buff, but they're saying that it was supposed to be doing, I think, 70%, and it's not doing that. So it actually made him, it's supposed to be doing 70%, but instead, I guess they got the numbers flipped, and so it's doing 30 instead of 70. So that'll be fixed. But really, that's it. Like I said, apologies for not being able to stream again. It's been a busy month for me so far. But I definitely didn't want to go into yet another week without having at least stream like content. So I will be streaming again for sure next week. So I will see you there. Now see you on the battlefield. Freezius out.